September 2025, NVIDIA announces a $100 billion investment in OpenAI. 2 weeks later, AMD offers OpenAI $40 billion worth of stock for a $90 billion GPU purchase commitment. 1 week after that, Broadcom announces a $350 billion deal with OpenAI. But here's what nobody's telling you. OpenAI only has $20 billion in annual revenue. So how is a company with $20 billion in revenue making over $1 trillion in spending commitments? The answer might make you uncomfortable. I'm going to show you something today that should terrify anyone paying attention. And I need you to stick with me because by the end of this video, you're going to see the AI industry in a completely different light. Before we start, I want to be crystal clear. I'm not saying AI is fake. I'm not saying the technology doesn't work. And I'm definitely not saying that every AI company is a scam. What I am saying is that the financial structure holding up this entire industry looks exactly, and I mean exactly, like a Ponzi scheme. And I'm going to prove it to you. First, let's talk about what a Ponzi scheme actually is, because this term gets thrown around a lot. A Ponzi scheme has 4 defining characteristics. 1. It promises returns that seem too good to be true. It pays early investors with money from new investors, not from actual profits. It requires constant growth to survive. The moment new money stops flowing in, it collapses. It uses complexity to hide the fact that there's no real underlying value being created. Now, keep these 4 things in your head as we go through what's actually happening in AI right now, because I'm going to show you that every single one of these boxes gets checked. Let's start with the promises. Sam Altman has said that AGI, artificial general intelligence, will create probably tens of trillions of dollars of value. Some estimates put it at $100 trillion in economic value. Dario Amodei from Anthropic claims AI will cure most diseases, solve poverty, and dramatically extend human lifespan within 5 to 10 years. Jensen Huang says we're in a new industrial revolution where AI will transform every industry on Earth. These are extraordinary claims, world-changing claims, and maybe they're right. But here's the problem. To justify current valuations and spending, these promises have to come true. There's no plan B. OpenAI is valued at $157 billion, Anthropic at $183 billion. These valuations assume massive, world-changing success. But let me show you the math they're not showing you. OpenAI projects they'll spend $295 billion in 2030 alone. To justify that spend with their current margins, they'd need $983 billion in revenue that year. Let me put that in perspective. They need to grow revenue by 85 times in 5 years. No company in history has ever done that. Not Apple, not Amazon, not Microsoft, nobody. For OpenAI to meet its obligations, it literally needs to become the largest, most profitable company in human history. Sound familiar? It should, because guaranteed extraordinary returns is Ponzi characteristic number 1. But it gets so much worse. Let me show you where the money is actually moving. This is where it starts to look less like a company and more like a shell game. Microsoft invests $13 billion in OpenAI, but that $13 billion, it's not cash. It's Azure Cloud credits. So Microsoft is investing in OpenAI so that OpenAI can buy Microsoft's products. OpenAI then uses Azure capacity, which creates revenue for Microsoft. Microsoft takes that revenue and places massive orders with NVIDIA for GPUs to handle OpenAI's compute needs. NVIDIA makes billions from Microsoft. Then NVIDIA turns around and invests $100 billion back into OpenAI. OpenAI uses that investment to buy more NVIDIA chips, and with the leftover money, OpenAI pays Microsoft. Let me say that again, slower. Microsoft pays OpenAI, OpenAI pays Microsoft, Microsoft pays NVIDIA, NVIDIA pays OpenAI, OpenAI pays NVIDIA, around and around and around. The same dollars are flowing in circles, being counted as revenue multiple times across different companies. This is literally how Ponzi schemes work. You're not creating new value, you're just moving money in circles and calling it growth. And this isn't the only loop, there are dozens of these structures. AMD gives OpenAI $40 billion in stock warrants at $0.01 per share. In exchange, OpenAI commits to buying $90 billion worth of AMD GPUs over time. But those warrants are worth almost as much as the entire purchase commitment. So OpenAI gets nearly free chips, and AMD gets what exactly? A promise that OpenAI will eventually have the money to pay them? Oracle, $300 billion deal? Amazon, $38 billion? CoreWeave, $22 billion. All of these deals have complex contingencies, stock warrants, revenue shares, and compute credits woven throughout. When you pay early investors with money from new investors, and nobody can track where real value is being created, that's Ponzi characteristic number 2. Now here's where it gets existential. These deals only work if everyone keeps making more deals. Microsoft's investment only makes sense if OpenAI keeps growing. OpenAI's commitments only work if NVIDIA keeps investing. NVIDIA's investment only works if Microsoft keeps buying chips. The moment anyone stops, the whole thing unravels. And we're already seeing cracks. OpenAI's CFO recently said, and I'm not making this up, that they're exploring governmental backstops for their obligations. Translation: if we can't pay our bills, maybe taxpayers can bail us out. Why would a healthy company with a revolutionary product need to discuss government bailouts before they've even failed? Because they know what we're figuring out. This only works if the music never stops. A Ponzi scheme requires constant new money flowing in. The moment it stops, everything collapses. That's characteristic number 3. Check. And finally, let's talk about the complexity. These deals are deliberately opaque. Stock warrants at $0.01 per share, revenue shares tied to compute capacity, contingent payments based on future valuations. Try to figure out how much real cash is changing hands versus how much is financial engineering, and you'll go insane. That's the point. Bernie Madoff's investors couldn't understand his split-strike conversion strategy. They just knew the returns kept coming, so they didn't ask questions. Today, investors can't untangle these AI deals. They just know valuations keep going up, so they don't ask questions. When you ask Madoff how he generated returns, he'd bury you in jargon. When you ask how OpenAI will pay $1.1 trillion in commitments with $20 billion in revenue, they bury you and talk about AGI and exponential growth. Complexity isn't a bug, it's a feature. It stops people from asking the obvious questions. That's Ponzi characteristic number 4. So let's review. Promises of extraordinary, almost unbelievable returns. Money from new investors paying obligations to old investors. Complete dependency on continuous growth cannot survive without it. Complexity designed to obscure where value is actually being created. I'm not saying every AI company is running a Ponzi scheme. I'm saying the financial structure of this industry, the web of circular investments, the impossible spending commitments, the valuations based entirely on future promises, walks like a Ponzi, talks like a Ponzi, and quacks like a Ponzi. And here's what keeps me up at night. Ponzi schemes don't fail because the idea is bad. They fail because the math eventually catches up with you. You run out of new investors, or people start asking for their money back, or someone does the actual math and realizes the emperor has no clothes. So when this unravels, and history suggests it will, who gets hurt? Not the people making these deals. Sam Altman, Jensen Huang, Satya Nadella, they're not stupid. They've already extracted enormous value. It'll be the pension funds that invested in these companies, the employees holding stock options, the startups that built their entire business on AI APIs that suddenly get 10x more expensive or disappear entirely. And if OpenAI gets its government backstop, then it's you, the taxpayer. Just like 2008, the profits are private, but the losses are socialized. There are real AI companies building real value. There are raisins in this mix. But when you mix raisins with turds, as Charlie Munger famously said, you still got turds. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe OpenAI will become a $1 trillion company. Maybe AGI will arrive in 2027 and justify every penny of this spending. But I did the math, and I cannot make it work under any realistic scenario. So I'm asking you to look at this with clear eyes. Follow the money. Ask where real value is being created versus where it's just being moved around in circles. Because the people making billions off this don't need you to be skeptical. They need you to keep believing. And history shows that the moment everyone stops believing at once, that's when things get ugly, fast. If this made you think differently about AI, hit subscribe. We're covering the stories the mainstream tech press won't touch. And if you think I'm completely wrong, tell me why in the comments. Because if I'm right, we're all going to feel it when this house of cards comes down.